Something bugging you? Come on in. Let's go for a drive. Today we get to go on a little drive with my friend, Miss Alycia Wood. And I see her right here. Hi, Alycia. How are you?
I'm great.
Good. Welcome to What's Bugging You.
I'm excited. I'm excited to hear what's bugging all of us.
Well, good. There's a seatbelt right over there. It's a little unconventional, but very cool. Thanks so much for coming for a drive with me and Roscoe. This is Roscoe, by the way. Roscoe, Alycia.
Hello, Roscoe. You're
Alycia,
doing
Roscoe.
great. You're my favorite color.
Mm-hmm.
Blue.
It is blue. I worked hard to remove the ugly color of blue. Somebody painted Roscoe, probably in the 80s. And so as I started removing that paint, this lovely baby blue that was underneath came about. Anyway, he's got character. He's fantastic. Well, okay, let me ask you this, because this has been bugging me, Roscoe, as well as the students that we work with.
And we don't want Roscoe to be upset.
No. So I'm thinking, given the kinds of things you talk about and speak on, you can give us some insight. Here it is, basically. Why are there so many women trapped in men's bodies currently?
Yes.
So transgenderism,
Yeah.
in the past handful of years, really,
Yeah.
has increased so drastically. I'm sure you know the stats. What's going on? Give us some insight. How should we be thinking about this, and as Christians especially?
Yeah. I mean, goodness. Yeah, that's a question that's probably on a lot of people's minds, you know? And traditionally, women being trapped in men's bodies was traditionally how it went. Usually it was men who were the ones who transitioned, and there was very few women who did. In fact, there was no studies even on women who did, because it was such a rare thing.
Right.
But now we see this massive rise, right? And so people are wondering what's going on. And honestly, it really comes down to oftentimes 4 particular conditions that seem to be plaguing so many Christians and non-Christians, whoever, just people in our society, even globally. Depression, anxiety, autism, and ADHD. And that combined with puberty and going through the teenage years of already struggling to like yourself because, maybe you didn't get as tall as you wanted, or maybe your face didn't shape the way it wanted, or your hair's not quite what you wanted. Who knows? It's a really just difficult time, and you're struggling with, who am I, and do I like who I am, and I'm not really happy, and I'm already dealing with depression and these things. And then, you go to the source of all help, which tends to be social media when you're a teenager.
Sure.
And they tell you, guess what? You're not liking yourself because you're really a boy. I know you were born a biological girl, but the reason you don't like yourself is because you're a boy. And so if you transition like I did, you're going to feel great about yourself. You're going to be happy, and things are going to be so much better. And so oftentimes, not necessarily because they want to be a boy, but more because they just don't want to be a girl, so many young girls are transitioning and identifying as young men because they believe, they were told that's the solution to your pain. That's the solution to what you're dealing with. If you do this, you will be happier. You will love yourself again. You will be joyous again. And so the future as a female doesn't look good. Many of them don't like how they look. They don't like that they can't keep up with the boys anymore because the boys got really fast, or they scared of what might happen to them as they grow up to become a woman and getting paid less and all these things that they're told. So being a woman doesn't sound like it's much fun. So I'm a boy.
So you think the initial direction change is more usually or always coming from confusion with with someone's own identity, not necessarily starting with, I'm convinced I am a boy in a woman's body. Is that right? Am I getting that?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it starts from a place of pain and trying to figure out, why am I hurting?
Okay.
And instead of having somebody say, well, let's talk about your depression. What's going on? Why are you feeling this way? Why don't you like yourself? Or what's going on in your life that's leading you to feel this way about being depressed? Instead of that, they kind of end up in the camp with other people who are saying, well, it's because you're trans. And that's really the issue, is you're wrestling at yourself because your true self hasn't really been expressed. So yeah, I mean, ultimately we all want to be loved and valued, and we want to see ourselves as valuable. And, we live in a society that, is tells us when it comes to the topic of abortion, well, that baby really isn't real, or that baby really isn't valuable, and we implant in people's minds that value comes and goes, and it's we as a society who determine value. And so when you're struggling to see yourself as you're already valuable, you're already coming from the mindset of, well, society determines whether or not I'm valuable.
Yeah.
And so I guess I got to find ways to make myself like myself, or make myself feel more seen and valued and loved. And so that plays a part in it too. So there's identity and value and self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
There's issues with depression and anxiety and autism and these kind of things. And there's also even a little bit, it might sound a bit odd, but for some young girls, part of the critical race theory piece as well is it's made a lot of people feel like, that they're part of an oppressed group just because they're born white, let's say. But when they become trans, now they're part of the oppressed group. And they're the victims and people like them. So there's even that's playing in for some people as well. So there's all these different kind of factors.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, the hurt and the identity crisis at the time of puberty and even mental health issues are not necessarily new. What is it about, what has changed about culture to now be pointing people in this direction of saying, well, you're probably trapped in the wrong body. Why has this become the attractive thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been thinking a lot about that, and and when people were dealing with certain depression and anxiety and things like that in the past, oftentimes they would, since you can't control your outside circumstances, you oftentimes do the only thing you can control is your body, right? And we would see anorexia. We would see people that would be anorexic or bulimic, and they would control their bodies in that way because that's the only thing that they had control over.
Right.
And I'm wondering if there's aspects of that now with this. I'm sad, I'm hurting, but I can control my body at least. I can't fix what's happening here. I can't fix what's happening in school. I can't fix what's happening with the friends. And I do have control over my body. And so therefore, since people are telling me this is the solution, then that's the way that they run to.
Yeah, that combined with this increasing idea that our bodies are not essentially part of us too. There's something at play in those combinations. Okay, that's very interesting. This is helpful even just to begin to get us thinking about what this current rise, this trend, if you will. And I don't want to say trend like, oh, this is just a trendy thing, so people are choosing it because it's trendy, but it is something that's increasingly on the rise, and so I'm not sure what better word to give it. Where would you suggest we go to continue chasing this rabbit, if you will, to consider this new thing, to get our minds wrapped around transgenderism and how we should be thinking about it as Christians? Maybe you in particular have some resources. I know you talk about this quite a bit, or you could point us in some other directions.
Yeah, sure. So just from a broad sense, if you want just kind of a broad overview, a broad picture of what's going on, I would recommend actually a book by a woman named Abigail Schreier called Irreversible Damage. And she kind of gives a broad picture and hits many different aspects, what's going on in the culture, what's going on in the schools, what's going on, advice for parents, this kind of thing, kind of a broad thing that can just give you a good overview as to what's going on. I hope to write something in the future. I haven't written anything on it yet, but it seems like that might be coming down the pipes.
Yeah.
So stay tuned to apologetics.org, and you might find some resources there, some articles written as well. But I also would just say, I know some people say the Bible's written so long ago, and how could it be relevant? But it's interesting to me because so many of the issues that we deal with are addressed actually in the very first chapter of the Bible. And this whole idea of image of God, like when we struggle to understand, are we valuable? Are we seen? Do we matter? Are we just a blob of cells? Well, the creation story tells us there's something unique about humanity. Like when God created the trees and the land animals, he did not breathe into them. When he created Adam, he breathed the breath of life into him. There was something different about humanity than everything else that God created. And that uniqueness lets us know that there is an intrinsic value to every one of us, regardless of whether or not we like ourselves, regardless of what anybody on social media might say. And I think coming back to some of these core principles that let us know, hey, while our society is telling us we can pull apart sexuality and gender, which really isn't true, when as you study these things, you learn that gender is actually biologically linked to your gametes, essentially, whether you are male or female, whether you've got sperm or egg. It's actually linked in. The chemicals in the reproductive process actually masculinize the brain or do whatever, and so your whole body essentially is then masculinized, and later on would be feminized. So you can't really pull apart the two like oftentimes people tell us. And so what essentially, when we read Genesis, it lets us know, hey, your gender's not a mistake. Like, the fact that you're male or female is not a mistake. If you're a tomboy girl like I was growing up and wanted to do sports and loved getting cuts on her knees and holes in her jeans, climbing trees, that's not a mistake. That's okay. That's a good thing. You're just a girl who loves those things. And so it lets us know that there's an intentionality behind us, and that can give us a sense of peace. That I may not act quite like everybody else, or I may not look quite like everybody else, but that doesn't mean that I'm wrong or flawed, because God breathed life into me, and He didn't do that into any other part of His creation.
That is so good. And I'm convinced that if we understand our true identity,
yes,
we know that as an end, what we're aiming for, that really is the only thing that will allow us to flourish, is if we are heading in that direction, rather than a direction that's not true, even if the culture promotes it as something that is good. And ultimately it won't be that.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Alycia.
Thank
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a big question. It's working through us all, for sure.